My brother didn't bring me to his launch party as his sister, he brought me as proof that his family had one good story and one cautionary tale. He texted me 3 days before the event. Come. Dress like you're trying. No question mark. No please. Just an instruction like I was still 16 and needed reminding how to behave in public. I almost didn't go. But something in me, the same part that still shows up to things it shouldn't, said yes. The party was held at a rented loft in Austin's East Side. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs. A bar cart that cost more than my monthly rent. My brother Ethan had a gift for making everything look like it belonged in a magazine spread, including himself. He was 29, sharp-jawed, the kind of person who made eye contact like it was a transaction he expected to win. His startup, a logistics software platform he called Flowbridge, was 3 months from launch and 2 rounds deep in funding conversations. He'd been talking about it for 2 years like it was his destiny. Maybe it was. I genuinely didn't know enough about his work to say. I'm Maya. 32. I do cybersecurity work, the kind that doesn't come with a title or a LinkedIn profile. I find vulnerabilities in systems before the wrong people do. Companies hire me quietly, pay me quietly, and pretend the problem I solved never existed. I don't go to conferences. I don't have a podcast. I work from a converted spare bedroom in my house in Denver, and my neighbors think I'm a data entry contractor, which is fine. My family doesn't know what to do with that. In our house, success had a specific shape. It looked like my brother's startup founder, pitch deck polished, the kind of son my parents referenced in conversations with their friends, the way people name-drop restaurants they've been to. My mother collected his accomplishments like small trophies she could arrange on a shelf. My father told his golf buddies that Ethan was building something real. And me? I was the other one. The one who never explained her job properly. The one who worked from home and didn't dress the part and once showed up to Christmas dinner with a laptop bag instead of a hostess gift. My mother had taken to describing my work as she does something with computers in a tone that made it sound like I repaired printers. I arrived at the loft 20 minutes late because I hit traffic on I-35 and also because I was not in a hurry to be there. The room was already full. Investors, advisors, people with good haircuts and good shoes, and the easy posture of people who understood exactly what the room expected from them. I spotted my parents near the drink table. My mother saw me first. She smiled the way she does when she's surprised I've shown up looking acceptable. The quick scan. The small recalibration. You came, she said. He asked me to, I said. She touched my arm briefly. Just try to let Ethan have his night. Don't bring up your work unless someone specifically asks. She said your work the way you might say you're rash. My father leaned in. There are real investors here, Maya. People who matter to Ethan's future. Just stay in the background tonight. I looked at him. When am I ever not in the background? He moved away like my question had been the rude thing. Ethan found me 30 minutes later. He'd been working the room with the focused energy of someone running a very important errand. He looked at my outfit, which was fine, and at my posture, which was also fine, and then at the drink in my hand, which he seemed to consider. You look almost like you belong here, he said. Thank you, I said, because I'd decided years ago to take his backhanded things as face value. He lowered his voice. There's someone I want you to meet. I should have known. With Ethan, wanting me to meet someone was never about me. It was about optics, about the geometry of a room, about what my presence could do for his story. I'd been used as a prop before the humble sibling who made his success look like contrast, not luck. Who? I asked. Garrett Cole, he said, and then watched my face for a reaction I didn't give him because I didn't recognize the name. He's the CEO of Sentinel Architecture. They do enterprise security infrastructure. He's considering a partnership with Flowbridge. Big deal. Massive. I need this, Maya. Okay, I said. What do you need from me? His smile shifted into something I'd seen before. Something comfortable and slightly cruel. Nothing. Just stand there. I just want him to see that I come from a grounded family. He's big on that. Family values, humble roots, the whole thing. He paused. Just don't be weird about the computer stuff. What does weird mean in this context? He straightened his jacket. Don't tell him what you actually do. Just say you work in tech. Keep it vague. He'll ask questions and you'll just make things complicated. His voice dropped. This is a big night. Don't take it over. I felt that sentence land in the same place his sentences always landed. Somewhere between my sternum and my stomach where old things live. I'm not going to take over your party, Ethan. Good, he said, already moving. Come on. He walked me across the room like he owned the floor. Heads turned the way they do when someone who commands attention moves through a space. I walked beside him and felt exactly like what I was. An accessory he'd decided to carry tonight. Garrett Cole stood near the window, city lights behind him, a drink held loosely in one hand. He was somewhere in his mid-50s. Silver gray hair, a lean build, the kind of quiet stillness that doesn't announce itself. His eyes moved across the room in the steady, patient way of someone who'd learned long ago that the most important information in any room tends to arrive without fanfare. Ethan stepped in with the warmth he performed well. Garrett, there's someone I want you to meet. He gestured toward me with the loose ease of a man presenting a mildly interesting object. This is my sister Maya. Garrett turned and looked at me. A real look. Not the quick inventory people do at parties. Something more considered. She's the family's, Ethan laughed once, short and bright. Let's say she's our cautionary tale. Couldn't figure out the whole career thing, ended up doing computer stuff from her living room. He grinned like he was giving me a gift by making the room laugh. We don't brag about this one. My mother, who had materialized at my elbow, gave a soft laugh. She's always been the quiet one. Keeps to herself. Her voice had that particular lightness she used when she was apologizing for me without technically apologizing. My father nodded once, sagely, the way fathers do when they want to seem above the moment they're fully participating in. For a second, the small cluster of people near Garrett offered polite smiles. Someone chuckled. It could have blown past like most cruelties do, dressed up as a joke, absorbed by the room, forgotten by morning. Garrett Cole didn't smile. He looked at me again. Not with pity. With something sharper. His head tilted very slightly, a fraction of a degree, the way it does when a memory is trying to surface. His drink stilled in his hand. His eyes moved to mine and then stayed. The conversations near us kept moving, the music kept playing. But between the two of us, something had happened that I didn't yet understand. Maya, he said, very quietly. Like he was saying the word to test it. Yes, I said. Maya with the Denver area code, he said, and it wasn't a question. The room felt like it contracted. Ethan blinked. Sorry? Garrett wasn't looking at Ethan, he was looking at me with something between recognition and the expression of a man doing very fast arithmetic in his head. His voice dropped another register. Handle 0 to 3, 777. That was you. My chest went still. My brother looked between us, smile flickering like a bulb about to go. I don't. What does that mean? Garrett set his drink down on the window ledge beside him. Very deliberately. The way you put something down when you need both hands for what comes next. It means, he said, and his voice was careful now, controlled, that I've been trying to find this person for 18 months. 3 years ago, I wasn't anyone's cautionary tale. I was just underpaid, underestimated, and alone at 2 a.m. with a cup of cold coffee and a problem I couldn't leave alone. I'd been doing freelance security work for about 4 years at that point. Small contracts. A regional bank. An e-commerce startup. A hospital system that had let its access controls rot for a decade and was shocked, genuinely shocked, when I told them what I found. The work was good. The money was inconsistent. My mother called it unstable. I called it honest. I had an account on a security research forum where I went by a handle 03777 because I'd picked it from a generator when I was 26 and never changed it. I'd built a small reputation there. Not famous. Known. The way specialists are known in small rooms. One night, I was running a passive scan on something unrelated and stumbled across an open endpoint that wasn't mine to find. It wasn't dramatic, no blinking red lights. Just a door standing ajar in a digital wall, the kind of thing that happens when a vendor applies a patch improperly and a configuration gets pushed wrong. I traced it back to an enterprise infrastructure platform. The kind of software that sat behind financial institutions, healthcare systems, government contractors. If someone found that vulnerability with different intentions than mine, the damage would be structural. Not one company. Dozens. I could have walked away. It wasn't my contract. It wasn't my problem. There was no one to bill for the 12 hours I was about to spend. I sat down anyway, because a system with a hole in it bothers my brain the same way a loose thread on a sweater bothers other people's hands. I documented the vulnerability. I wrote a full disclosure report, the flaw, the mechanism, the exposure radius, a remediation path. Then I found a security contact address listed in a footer on their developer portal, attached the report, and sent it from an anonymous relay tied to my handle. I expected an automated response or nothing. I got a reply 4 days later. Brief, professional, confirmed and patched, no further contact requested per your preference. Thank you. That was it. I moved on to other things. I filed the experience somewhere in the back of my mind next to all the other things I'd done that no one would ever know about. I didn't know who ran the platform. I didn't connect the name Sentinel Architecture to the man standing in front of me at my brother's party. How could I? I hadn't looked it up. It hadn't mattered. But apparently, on his end, it had mattered very much. Garrett led me away from the group without asking. He simply turned and walked toward the quieter end of the loft, near a hallway that led to the building's utility corridor, and I followed because there was nothing else to do. The music dulled as we moved. The voices dropped to background noise. He stopped and faced me. You found a 0-day in our authentication layer, he said. In the partner access module. The one we'd been using for 18 months across 43 enterprise clients. I found an open endpoint, I said. I don't know the internal architecture well enough to call it a 0-day. Our security team called it a 0-day, he said. After they spent 3 days reverse engineering what you gave us, because the patch documentation you included was thorough enough to make them feel embarrassed. A small, dry smile. They didn't appreciate that. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I know. That's what made them more embarrassed. He studied me. We tried to find you. The relay address was dead by the time we thought to reach back. The forum handle had no profile attached. Our legal team suggested we let it go. I didn't want to let it go. Why? I asked. Because the people who find things like that and tell you about it instead of selling it, those people are rare. I wanted to know who you were. He paused. I still want to know who you are. I looked at him. I'm apparently the family's cautionary tale. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Yes, he said. I heard that. I drove home that night, thinking about nothing useful. The city lights on the highway, the particular emptiness of a party that had asked something from me I hadn't agreed to give. Ethan had found me before I left and pulled me aside with the tight smile of a man recalibrating in real time. What was that? He'd asked. A conversation, I'd said. He pulled you away from the whole group, Maya. What did you talk about? Old work, I'd said, and watched his face move through confusion and something else. Something unsettled. What does he know about your work? Ethan asked. Apparently more than you do, I said, which was unkind but accurate, and I walked out before he could find a response. Garrett's assistant contacted me the next morning. Professional, brief. Mr. Cole would like to speak with you at your convenience. A number. A time window. I called that afternoon. Garrett didn't preamble. He told me that Sentinel Architecture had recently discovered anomalies in their partner licensing system. Usage patterns that didn't match contracted access. Code segments in a third-party integration that bore structural similarity to proprietary modules Sentinel had spent 4 years developing. The kind of similarity that doesn't come from parallel thinking. The kind that comes from copying. We have suspicions, he said. But suspicions aren't evidence. Evidence requires someone who can read the code and tell the difference between inspiration and theft. I was quiet for a moment. Who's the integration? I asked. He told me. The name sat in my chest for a second before I understood what I was feeling. Then I understood. Flowbridge. My brother's platform. I said, I need a day to think about this. Garrett said, take what you need. I took 45 minutes, which is roughly how long it took me to sit with the discomfort of what I already knew I was going to do. I called him back. I'll do it, I said. But I need you to know something first. The company you mentioned, the founder, is my brother. Silence. I'm telling you now, I said. Before I look at anything. So you can decide if you want someone else. Garrett said, I want you. The conflict of interest is noted. It's also why you're more valuable, not less. You'll look harder for an explanation that clears him. He was right. I did. I spent 6 days reading code I wasn't supposed to have access to, technically, until Sentinel's legal team put the proper NDAs in place, which they expedited because Garrett asked them to. I went through Flowbridge's routing optimization module line by line. I built comparison matrices between their code architecture and Sentinel's documented proprietary frameworks. I looked for coincidences. I wanted to find them. I found the opposite. The core routing logic in Flowbridge's partner API matched Sentinel's proprietary optimization engine at a structural level that went beyond any reasonable definition of independent development. Variable naming conventions that were idiosyncratic to Sentinel's internal coding style. A specific error handling sequence that one of Sentinel's engineers had written as a workaround for an edge case, the kind of solution that only exists if you'd encountered that specific problem, not if you'd designed from scratch. A comment block stripped but not scrubbed cleanly enough that still contained a fragment of a Sentinel internal project code. This wasn't inspiration, this was an overlap. Someone had gotten access to Sentinel's codebase and built Flowbridge's most valuable feature on top of what they found there. The question was how. Sentinel's internal access logs would answer that, and Sentinel's security team was already pulling them. But from the outside, looking at the code, the what was already clear. I stared at the screen in my spare bedroom for a long time. The hum of the server stack in the corner. The Denver sky outside the window going from gray to dark. I thought about Ethan at 22, borrowing $100 from me and never paying it back. I thought about Christmas 2 years ago when he gave a speech at dinner about building something real, and my father had looked at him like he'd hung the lights on the tree personally. I thought about we don't brag about this one, and the small, comfortable laughter that followed it. I thought about whether I was doing this because it was right or because I wanted him to hurt. I spent a night sitting with that question. I think it matters not whether you do the right thing, but whether you understand why you're doing it. Because the answer determines what kind of person you are when it's over. By morning, I had my answer. I wasn't reporting this to hurt Ethan. I was reporting it because a system with a hole in it bothers me. Because someone built something real, 4 years of work, real engineers, real development, and had it taken. Because the truth exists whether or not it's convenient for my family's dinner table conversation. I called Garrett. I have the documentation, I said. Do you want it? Yes, he said. There's a specific access pathway I can't identify from the outside, I said. Someone got into Sentinel's codebase. The access logs from your security team will tell you how. When you pull those, cross-reference against guest credentials issued for the developer beta program in the last 3 years. A pause. Why the beta program specifically? Because the stolen elements predate Flowbridge's founding by about 2 months, I said. Whoever accessed the code did it before they started building. They were in your system as a credentialed user. Another pause, longer. Flowbridge was in our beta program, Garrett said. I know, I said. The meeting Garrett called wasn't a confrontation the way confrontations look in movies. There was no single room, no dramatic reveal, no moment where everyone gasped. It was quieter than that, and worse. Sentinel's legal team had spent 2 weeks building the evidentiary record before anyone sat across from Ethan. By the time they did, the access logs had confirmed what I'd suspected. A beta program credential registered to an early Flowbridge development account had queried Sentinel's proprietary routing module 17 times over 6 weeks. Screenshots, timestamps, the credential's IP history. The code comparison I'd provided, annotated and formatted into something a judge could read. I wasn't in that meeting. I had asked not to be. Garrett had respected that. He'd offered me the option to be present, professionally, as the analyst who'd done the documentation. I said no. I'd done the work. The work would speak. I didn't need to watch my brother's face. I found out afterward, from Garrett, that Ethan had denied it for about 40 minutes before the weight of the documentation made denial structurally impossible. Then, he had tried a different approach: minimization, context, the argument that what he'd accessed was preliminary and his team had built on top of it significantly, which is the kind of thing people say when they've been caught and are hoping the degree of theft will be judged rather than the fact of it. Sentinel's lawyers were not interested in degree. Ethan called me that night. I let it ring. He called again. I answered the second time because I'm not capable of ignoring a second call from someone I grew up with, no matter what they've done. You did this, he said. His voice had the particular flatness of someone who'd burned through anger and come out the other side into something colder. I documented what was there, I said. You went looking for it. I was asked to look. I told Garrett you were my brother before I agreed. He knew. I knew. I paused. The question isn't whether I looked. The question is what I found. You could have told me first, he said. Would that have changed what you did? Silence. You've always needed me to fail, he said. That's what this is. I sat with that for a moment. The old reflex to apologize was there, that familiar pull toward smoothing the surface, making the uncomfortable thing go away. I felt it. I let it pass. Ethan, I said, you called me the family's cautionary tale in front of a room full of people. You told your investors I couldn't figure out my career. You've been telling that story for years. And somewhere in those years, you apparently helped yourself to someone else's work and built your whole pitch on top of it. I paused. I didn't need you to fail. You were already doing that. He hung up. My mother called the next morning. Her voice was warm, which I'd learned by now was a warning. Sweetheart, she began, drawing the word out the way she did when she was about to ask for something. We've been talking to Ethan. This whole situation, we think it's gotten out of hand. These things happen in startups. Boundaries get blurry. It's a learning experience. Intellectual property theft isn't a learning experience, I said. It's a federal matter. Maya. Her voice shifted. The warmth dropped by about 10 degrees. You're his sister. I know I am, I said. He mentioned it at his party, right before he told his investors I was the family's cautionary tale. She was quiet. I found what I found, I said, and I told the truth about it. That's all I did. You always have to make things about yourself, she said, and the words had the practiced ease of something she'd said in her head many times before. Funny, I said, I thought this was about Ethan. She didn't have a response to that. She asked me not to make things worse. I told her I didn't plan to do anything else. I told her the situation was where it was, and that was between Ethan and Sentinel's lawyers now. She told me I'd always been difficult. I told her I loved her, which was true, and I hung up, which was necessary. My father emailed 3 days later. 1 paragraph. Formal, which meant he was very upset. He said I had prioritized my professional ambitions over my family. He said there would be consequences for relationships. He said he hoped I understood what I'd done. I read it twice and then replied with 4 sentences. I told him I understood exactly what I'd done. I told him I had documented the truth because someone else's years of work had been taken. I told him I hoped Ethan found a way to address it with integrity. I told him I loved him. He didn't reply. 6 weeks after the loft party, Garrett called and offered me a position. Director of Threat Intelligence, Sentinel Architecture. Scope to build my own team, a budget that would have made my mother stop using the phrase computer stuff, a title that would have given my parents something to say at dinner. I sat in my converted spare bedroom in Denver and looked at the job description he'd emailed over. It was a good role. Real work. The kind of problems that kept you sharp. I said no. Garrett went quiet for a moment. Can I ask why? Because I spent a long time being the kind of person that someone else's story gets told about, I said. Ethan's story. My parents' story. And I don't want to trade that for being the person in Sentinel's story. I want to keep being the person who works the problem. You could do that inside Sentinel, he said. Not the same way, I said. When you work inside, you work for the story they're telling about themselves. I want to work for the actual truth of the system. A pause, then. Fair enough. We put together an independent contract instead. Project-based. Clear scope. Real autonomy. The kind of arrangement where I remain exactly what I am, someone who looks at systems from the outside and tells you where they're bleeding. It was more money than the director role, actually. Garrett didn't mention that until after I'd said yes, which I respected. Ethan's situation moved through the phase that these things move through. Lawyers, documentation, negotiations over exposure and restitution. Flowbridge's funding conversations collapsed. The company didn't survive the quarter. I know these things, not because anyone told me directly, but because information like that travels even when you're not looking for it. My parents stopped calling for about 2 months. Then my mother called on a Sunday evening, her voice stripped of the warmth as weapon, just tired, the way she sounds when she's not performing. I don't know how to talk to you about this, she said. I know, I said. I don't know if you were wrong or right. I think you do, I said. I think that's why it's hard. She was quiet. He's your brother. He is, I said. That doesn't change what he did. Does it change nothing? I thought about that. Really thought, not as a reflex. It changes how much it hurt, I said finally. It doesn't change what was true. She didn't say much after that. But she stayed on the phone for another 12 minutes, which with my mother is a kind of apology. I drove past the loft building a few weeks later, on my way somewhere else. The Edison bulb windows were dark. A different company's name on the directory by the door. I slowed down without meaning to. I thought about Ethan's hand on my arm, steering me across that room. The brightness of his smile. This is the family's cautionary tale. The polite laughter, the way the sound moved through the room like something everyone had agreed to pretend was harmless. I used to hear those words and feel them settle into something permanent in my chest. A verdict I hadn't appealed. Now I heard them differently. The way you hear an old diagnosis that turned out to be wrong. Not angry. Not even sad. Just clear. He'd needed me to be a cautionary tale because it was easier than looking at what he was building and asking whether it was real. The label said more about the person who needed it than the person it was placed on. Here's what I know now, after all of it. The people who tell you who you are, the ones who decide your label and apply it in public, with a smile. For an audience, they're usually doing it because your actual existence threatens the story they need to tell about themselves. Not because they know you. Because they don't. You don't owe them the story they wrote for you. You don't argue with the label. You don't hold a press conference. You go home, you open your laptop, and you do the work that's actually yours to do. Let the system tell the truth. Systems always do, eventually. If you know how to read them. I drove the rest of the way home with the windows down and the radio off, watching the city move in its own logic around me. Rails and overpasses and signal lights timed to patterns that most people never think about. The whole thing humming underneath everything, keeping the world from jamming up. I know how to read it. I always have. That was never the cautionary part.